What if I told you that for 70 years, a disease terrorized England that could kill you before the sun set on the same day you caught it? No rash, no lesions. No warning, just violent chills, blinding headaches, and sweat so profuse that victims would literally drown in their own fluids within hours. It killed thousands. It toppled royal bloodlines. It changed the course of English history. And then in 1551, it simply vanished. No one has ever figured out what it was. This is the story of the English sweating sickness, the mystery disease that haunted Tudor England and disappeared without leaving a single clue behind. August 1485. Henry Tudor had just won the Battle of Bosworth Field, ending the Wars of the Roses, and claiming the English throne as Henry VII. But his soldiers brought something back with them, something worse than any battlefield wound. By the time Henry's victorious army reached London on August 28th, men were already falling ill. Within weeks, the disease exploded across the capital. Contemporary accounts describe it as a horror beyond comprehension. As one chronicler wrote, "A new kind of sickness came through the whole region, which was so sore, so painful and sharp, that the like was never hardy of to any man's remembrance before that time." This was written by men whose grandfathers had survived the Black Death. The symptoms came without warning, usually at night or in the early morning hours. First, an overwhelming sense of dread, as if your body knew something terrible was about to happen. Then violent chills and tremors. Within an hour, fever, intense headache, dizziness, excruciating pain in the neck, shoulders, and limbs. And then the sweating began, not normal perspiration, not the sweat of exertion or heat. This was something different, something catastrophic. Victims described their bodies literally pouring water. Their clothes would be soaked through in minutes. The smell, described by physician Thomas Forestier as sudden great sweating and stinking with redness of the face and of all the body, was overwhelming. The sweat brought delirium, rapid pulse, chest pain, an irresistible urge to sleep, which physicians believed was fatal if you gave in to it. Death came quickly, sometimes within 3 hours of the first symptoms, sometimes within 8. If you survived the first 24 hours, you would likely recover completely, but most didn't make it to 24 hours. In just 6 weeks, the disease killed approximately 15,000 people in London, out of a population of only 50,000. Among the dead, 2 Lord Mayors, 6 aldermen, and 3 sheriffs. England was in chaos. Henry VII, who had just become king, postponed his coronation. Mass superstition and paranoia gripped the country. People believed God had sent the disease to punish supporters of the new Tudor dynasty. By late October 1485, the outbreak had ended as suddenly as it began, but it would be back. The disease lay dormant for 17 years. Life returned to normal. People began to forget. And then, in March 1502, it struck at the heart of the Tudor dynasty. Arthur, Prince of Wales, Henry VII's eldest son and heir to the throne, was just 15 years old. He'd been married to Catherine of Aragon, daughter of Spain's powerful Catholic monarchs, for only 5 months. The marriage was meant to secure England's future, to forge an alliance that would make the Tudor claim to the throne unshakable. Arthur and Catherine were living at Ludlow Castle on the Welsh border when both fell ill with what was described as a malign vapor which proceeded from the air. The symptoms fit the profile of sweating sickness, though the disease typically killed within a day, and Arthur's illness lasted longer. Catherine, confined to her rooms and attended by Spanish physicians, slowly recovered. Arthur did not. On April 2nd, 1502, 6 months before his 16th birthday, the Prince of Wales died. The news reached the royal court at Greenwich Palace 3 days later. Henry VII was awakened by his confessor in the dead of night. The king was devastated. His wife, Elizabeth of York, came to comfort him, assuring him they were young enough to have more children. After she left, Elizabeth herself broke down weeping. Henry had to come comfort her in return. Arthur's death changed everything. His younger brother, 10-year-old Henry, was now heir to the throne. Within months, plans were being made for Henry to eventually marry his brother's widow, Catherine. Elizabeth of York became pregnant again, hoping to provide a spare heir. She died in childbirth in February 1503, along with the baby. When Henry VII died in 1509, Young Henry, now 18, became King Henry VIII. He married Catherine of Aragon within weeks. The sweating sickness had set in motion a chain of events that would define English history. Henry's obsession with a male heir, his eventual break with Catherine, the creation of the Church of England, the rise and fall of Anne Boleyn. All because a mysterious disease killed the wrong prince. The disease returned in 1508, then 1517. Each outbreak claimed thousands, but nothing compared to what came next. June 1528, London. The fourth epidemic of sweating sickness hit with devastating force, spreading through the city in a matter of days. Dr. John Caius, who would later document the disease, described its terrifying speed. This disease immediately killed some in opening their windows, some in playing with children in their street doors, some in 1 hour, many in 2. It destroyed. The royal court was thrown into panic. King Henry VIII, who had always been obsessive about his health, immediately fled London. He moved from palace to palace, never staying in one place long enough for the disease to catch him. His servants passed meals through hatches indoors. Physicians checked him multiple times daily. No one was allowed close contact. Anne Boleyn, Henry's obsession, his forbidden love, the woman he was trying to make his queen, was sent away from court for safety. She returned to her family home at Hever Castle in Kent. It wasn't enough. In mid-June, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting fell ill with the sweat. Within days, Anne herself contracted the disease. So did her father, Thomas Boleyn. When word reached Henry that Anne was sick, he was devastated. He wrote her a letter expressing his anguish. "I would gladly bear half of your illness to make you well." He sent his second-best physician, William Butts, to treat her. Anne was lucky. She survived. So did her father and her brother George, who fell ill at the same time while serving at court. But not everyone was so fortunate. William Carey, Anne's brother-in-law, married to her sister Mary, died in June. Sir William Compton, one of Henry's closest advisors, died within hours. The diplomat Francis Poinsot-Gon, French ambassador Jean du Bellay, reported that by the end of June, 2,000 people had died in London alone. The 1528 outbreak was unique in another way. It was the only time the disease spread beyond England, reaching as far as Hamburg, Scandinavia, and Russia. Europe trembled before the English sweat. And then, once again, it vanished. By autumn, Anne was back at court. The dead were buried, life resumed. But the terror remained. The last outbreak came in 1551, during the reign of Edward VI, Henry VIII's young son. Diarist Henry Mackin recorded the chaos. The V-Day of July began a new suite in London. Their dead in London money merchants and rash men and women, and young men and old. King Edward fled from Westminster to Hampton Court, then to Hunsdon, anywhere to escape the disease that had killed his Uncle Arthur 50 years earlier. The disease seemed to prefer victims who were young, healthy, and wealthy. Children were rarely affected. The elderly were spared. But young men in the prime of life, particularly courtiers, clergy, and the educated elite, dropped like flies. On July 16, 1551, 2 teenage boys died within hours of each other at Cambridge. Both were sons of Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, and his wife Catherine Willoughby. Henry Brandon was about 16. His younger brother Charles was about 13. They died in the same bed. The Annals of Halifax recorded 44 deaths in their parish alone during the 1551 outbreak. Oxford and Cambridge were devastated, with half the population of some college towns succumbing to the disease. But here's what's truly disturbing. Contemporary records suggest that in some areas, the mortality rate reached 50% or higher. In others, nearly everyone who caught the disease survived. The pattern made no sense. And then, after the summer of 1551, the English sweating sickness disappeared forever. No fade out, no gradual decline. It simply never returned. Over the next 4 centuries, England would face plague, cholera, typhus, influenza. But the sweat, the disease that could kill you before sunset, was gone. For 500 years, medical historians have tried to solve the mystery. The theories are numerous and none of them quite fit. Hantavirus? In 2014, researchers suggested that the symptoms matched a form of hantavirus, a disease spread by rodent droppings that can cause pulmonary distress, fever, and sweating. Hantavirus struck the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico in 1993, with similar symptoms. But hantavirus doesn't spread person to person, and the sweating sickness clearly did. The patterns don't match. Influenza? The 1918 Spanish flu came in waves and killed quickly, just like the sweat. But flu produces respiratory symptoms that contemporary physicians would have recognized. And flu doesn't just disappear for centuries. Anthrax poisoning? Some suggested contaminated wool or grain could have caused outbreaks. Anthrax can produce profuse sweating and rapid death, but anthrax causes skin lesions in most cases. And Dr. John Caius, the most detailed observer of the disease, noted that victims had no skin eruptions whatsoever. Relapsing fever. Spread by ticks and lice, this disease can cause recurring epidemics and profuse sweating. But it doesn't kill in hours, and survivors develop immunity, something that clearly didn't happen with the sweat. Multiple victims suffered several bouts of the disease before finally succumbing. The climate connection? Every outbreak occurred in summer or early autumn, usually following periods of heavy rain or flooding. This suggests a vector, possibly mosquitoes or rodents, whose populations exploded under certain environmental conditions. The 1480s through 1550s coincided with the beginning of the Little Ice Age, a period of cooling that caused erratic weather patterns across Europe. Volcanic eruptions in Indonesia triggered unusual seasonal fluctuations. Perhaps the disease needed very specific conditions to thrive, conditions that simply ceased to exist after 1551. But that still doesn't tell us what it was. Dr. Paul Heyman, one of the leading researchers studying the disease, admits, "We are still going through old documents looking for clues. Whether or not the English sweating sickness will strike again is hard to say. We regularly see the reemergence of new viruses, and the possibility is there. 500 years later, we still don't know. The disease killed thousands. It changed the line of royal succession. It sent kings fleeing in terror and shaped the religious future of England. And we don't even know what to call it. Not plague, not typhus. Not any disease we recognize today. The sweating sickness remains one of medicine's greatest unsolved mysteries. A disease that appeared from nowhere, terrorized a nation for 70 years, and vanished without explanation. No pathogen has ever been isolated. No victims' remains have yielded DNA evidence. The written accounts from physicians like John Caius are detailed and meticulous, but they describe something that doesn't match any modern disease. Here's what haunts me about the sweating sickness. It targeted the wrong people. Most epidemic diseases hit the very young, the very old, the malnourished, the poor. But the sweat went after healthy young men, the wealthy, the educated, the future kings and queens of England. Arthur Tudor, who should have been king, dead at 15. The Brandon boys, heirs to a dukedom, dead within hours of each other. Thousands of merchants, clergymen, scholars, the backbone of Tudor society, wiped out in single summer. Why them? What about young, healthy, well-fed bodies made them particularly vulnerable? We may never know. The last recorded case was in 1551. Since then, nothing. Not a single confirmed outbreak. Not one DNA match in modern disease databases. It's as if the disease served its purpose, reshaping English history, clearing the way for Henry VIII, terrifying a generation, and then simply ceased to exist. But diseases don't just vanish. They evolve, they persist. They hide in animal reservoirs and re-emerge decades later. So where did it go? Is it still out there, waiting in some rodent population or insect vector, needing only the right conditions to return? Could climate change recreate the environmental factors that triggered the 1480s outbreaks? Or was the English sweating sickness something truly unique? A perfect storm of pathogen, host, and environment that can never be replicated. The physicians of Tudor England couldn't save their patients. They could only watch as healthy people collapsed and died within hours, their bodies betraying them in ways that made no medical sense. 5 centuries of scientific advancement later, we still can't explain it. Somewhere in the graves of London, Ludlow, Cambridge, and 100 other English towns lie the victims of a disease we can't name. Young men who woke up feeling fine and were dead by dinner. Princes who should have been kings. Brides who became widows within months. And the only thing we know for certain is this: if it came back tomorrow, we still wouldn't know how to stop it. The English sweating sickness remains, to this day, one of the most terrifying medical mysteries in human history. A disease that killed in hours, that vanished without a trace, and that could conceivably return at any moment.